Good morning and welcome to the start of a new school year. This has been a summer like no other, and we know you have been spending countless hours thinking about this fall and the many, many decisions that have had to be made for your students, your parents, your team members. You haven't waited to make plans. You've been making them, changing them, and sometimes changing again since the pandemic began. You've shifted, you've had to pivot as more was learned in this novel virus and infection rates ebbed and flowed. You've been thinking about those children with special needs and social emotional issues. You've been thinking about those who are immunocompromised. You've been thinking about your athletes and your band students, about single parents and essential workers who must go to work. You've been thinking about students who need food and internet, thinking about your own families and keeping them healthy and safe. And you have absolutely been thinking about how to best educate students in this unprecedented time. The term overwhelmed may not even scratch the surface about how many of you have felt. But it's time to take a breath. Time to extend yourself the same grace you've been extending to others. Time to look at the positive, that you are our education first responders. And that's great news for our kids. This morning, we want you to sit back, relax, have another cup of coffee, enjoy these three terrific keynote speakers who are here to help you meet the moment of this new school year. So we want to welcome you, and we'd love to introduce our first speaker, Alex Kajitani. Alex is the 2009 California Teacher of the Year and a top 4 finalist for the National Teacher of the Year. He's an acclaimed author and speaker and was featured on CBS Evening News, where Katie Couric declared she loved that guy. During the COVID-19 shutdown, Alex created Wacky Math Hour, where thousands of parents registered their kids to attend his free online weekly class to keep kids learning and excited about school. Welcome, Alex.
Al, thank you so much. It is an absolute honor to be with you today. I know you could be doing many, many things, but you've chosen to be here with us. And so we are determined to make this totally worth your time. So thank you. It is, again, such an honor to be here. I have to start by admitting something. That is not actually a brick wall behind me. It's a tapestry that I've hung up in order to look like a brick wall as part of my virtual classroom. And, the truth is, it's hard to tell what is real these days. As teachers, it seems like we just finished what was clearly one of the strangest school years in history. And never before have we entered into a school year like the one we're about to enter into, with so many unknowns. And, as our country grapples with the COVID-19 pandemic and people marching in the streets to demonstrate that Black Lives Matter and worrying about the future of our schools and our education system, there are 3 things that will never change, whether we are teaching online, in person, or in between. I call them the 3 E's, or for short, the 3 E's. 3E. Thank you very much. I'll be here all night. Okay, moving on. The first E is engagement. As teachers, we've been trained to engage with our students, whether they are in front of us in the classroom or remotely on a computer screen. Our ability to engage with our students and build relationships will never waver. And when schools closed their doors and shifted to remote learning, many of us affirmed what we already knew, that engaging with our students, parents, and families is absolutely critical. Now, I'm a math teacher, so as you heard, when schools started to shut down, I knew that helping students learn math was going to fall toward the bottom of the priority list for many parents. So I wanted to keep a way to keep kids engaged in math and learning about math. So as you heard, I created Wacky Math Hour, a totally free weekly math class that kids from anywhere could join. I put out a few Facebook posts, and wouldn't you believe it, we had over 2,000 teachers and parents sign their kids up for the class. Each week, kids from all over the world joined us. And when the Nebraska Education Association realized that not every kid has access to a computer or the internet, they teamed up with their local television station to broadcast it on into homes all across Nebraska, along with other programs created by teachers called Teacher TV. You know, my friend Lynn Porter is a PE teacher in the small town of Williston, Vermont. And when her school closed its doors due to the pandemic, she wanted to make sure all of her students continue to get outside and move their bodies. And so she collected and painted over 400 rocks, each with a number on them. And anytime a student found a rock, they contacted her and they recorded where each rock was found on a city map. Of course, you know what happened. Parents, grandparents, and community members all got involved and invested in finding and reporting the rocks. And engagement doesn't just happen in the big things we do. As teachers, we know how important it is to stand outside our doors and greet every student as they walk into the classroom. We can do the same thing as they enter our virtual classrooms. When we greet each of our students as they sign into Zoom or whatever platform we're using, we are letting them know how glad we are to see them, how important it is that they show up. And whether it's from our kitchen tables, our backyards, or wherever we're conducting class that day, we're always looking out for them. As teachers, that's what we do. We find a way to engage our students. And the second E is explain. I will never forget what my first principal, David Geck, told me during my first week of teaching. He said, "A great teacher can teach with a plot of sand and a stick." That became so clear during this pandemic. And as many of us know, the pandemic teaching of 2020 was not really distance learning, it was crisis teaching, and we did pretty well. Sure, we struggled to adjust and adapt to a new way of teaching, and we did it with very little time or preparation, and we made a bunch of mistakes along the way. I will admit, I was the first person that I know to get Zoom bombed. I had never even heard the term Zoom bombing, and all of a sudden it was happening to me, and it was pretty embarrassing. But what we found is that Zoom and the rest of the online platforms are just a technologically evolved version of a plot of sand and a stick. It is our ability as teachers to explain things to our students, which spark in them the true ability to think, to learn, and to grow. Claudine James is a high school history teacher in Malvern, Arkansas. She came across a poem titled Lockdown by Brother Richard, and she was so inspired to use it as a springboard to help her students embrace their own social and emotional needs, to help understand what they were experiencing during social isolation. And so, in conjunction with National Poetry Month, she also reached out to Young People's Poet Laureate Margarita Engel, who shared her work with the students. Her students then wrote their own lockdown poems, and Claudine was so inspired by them, she shared them with the local newspaper, who published all of her students' poems, which had everybody in the community reading them, reaching out, and bringing them together. There are, of course, times when we might not know how to explain something. What a great opportunity to step back and let our students share their voice, their experiences, and help them learn along with the rest of us to navigate an uncertain world where their voice needs to be heard. And you know, when it comes to explaining things, many of us who work with kids are being pushed way out of our comfort zones as we're now struggling to find ways to explain topics that are not comfortable, as we have conversations about race and ethnicity and how we can create anti-racist classrooms, along with supporting our LGBTQ students. When I first started teaching, I thought the quadratic formula was the hardest thing I was ever going to have to teach. I got to tell you, it's still not that easy. And you know, when your last name is Kajitani, your students, they always just want to know one thing. Can we just call you Mr. K? No, I tell them. And when they ask why, I tell them that I'm really proud of my Japanese last name and that it's important to me that they know how to pronounce it correctly. And, you know, I have to also tell you that while my dad is Japanese, who I got my name from, my mom is Jewish. And so when they were pregnant with me, they lived in San Francisco, California, in a tiny little apartment next to a struggling unknown writer named Alex Haley. And so Alex Haley would, of course, go on to write one of the most widely read books of all time, Roots, which turned into one of the most widely watched miniseries of all time, Roots. And so when my mom went into labor, Alex Haley helped them down the stairs and into the car. And as they drove off to the hospital, He said, I hope everything goes well. And my mom in that moment turned to my dad and said, hey, let's name our child Alex. And my dad, knowing never to argue with a pregnant woman in labor, said, okay. And people have been calling me Alex ever since. And while it's pretty cool to tell the story of being named after a famous writer, it also means I grew up as a half Jewish, half Japanese American named after an African American. And growing up in Southern California, I speak Spanish. So I am all messed up. It would have been really nice to have some teachers back in the 1980s and 90s, who could have helped explain the world to me and help me make sense of topics like race and ethnicity. And here we are in 2020, where so many have filled the streets to demand racial justice and rethink how we run our governments, our neighborhoods, and of course, our schools. As we find ourselves in this moment of rethinking, let's keep our students in the loop as we explain all that is happening in the world right now. As teachers, that's what we do. We explain things. And the final E is empower. There are a lot of lessons that we've learned from the COVID pandemic. And one of them is most certainly that we live in a world that is often unpredictable, unimaginable, and yes, unfair. As teachers and as educators who engage and explain, I truly believe we can empower our students by giving them the equitable education that they are entitled to. Giving our students, all our students, the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to pursue their dreams is really, really hard. And it's really, really necessary. Of course, empowering our students and helping them means also helping them fulfill their basic human needs. 2 years ago, I'll never forget, I had a student named Luis, and Luis was an 8th grader. And on the very last day of school, we do a promotion ceremony for our 8th graders. And then we give them the special treat. We let them leave school early and start their summer early. So it's about 11 o'clock in the morning. The ceremony's over. I go back to my classroom. I'm so excited. I get to start cleaning up my room a little early. All of a sudden, Luis shows up at the door of my classroom. I said, hey, Luis, what's going on? He said, hey, can I hang out here until the lunch bell rings? I said, yeah, sure, but you can go home. You get to start early, your summer. He said, I know, I just feel like hanging out here. I said, come on, what are you doing here? Do you have a little brother or sister that you're waiting for? He said, no, I just want to hang out. I said, come on, Luis, tell me. I'll never forget what he said. He said, Mr. Kajitani, I just want to eat the free lunch one more time before I go home all summer to nothing. Now, I wish so badly that this story was about how I've kept in touch with Luis and helped him thrive over the past 2 years, but it's not one of those stories. As teachers, it's really hard to stay in touch with all of our students, but I thought about Luis so much when school shut down this past March. Was he sitting at home with nothing to eat? I drove past so many schools during the shutdown, and I saw staff members in the parking lot serving breakfast and lunches to students and families who need it. Sometimes the most empowering thing that we can do for our students is make sure that they're safe and staying healthy. There is no doubt that much of our conversations around pedagogy this fall are going to focus on learning loss and how we can accelerate and make up for the academic gaps that have been created over the past few months. And while we must certainly acknowledge this, truly empowering our students, truly powering our students means meeting them where they are, taking them to where they can be, and then seeing if we can push them just a little bit further. This is what we've always done because this is what we've been trained to do as teachers. So many of our students are going to show up to our virtual or in-person classrooms eager to get back to it, eager to interact with their classmates and well-equipped emotionally and technologically to get started. And many of our students are going to show up having really struggled over the past months, as they've watched a parent lose a job due to the shutdown of the economy, and while trying to make sense of a world that now requires them to wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, and in many cases, care for a friend or a family member who's caught COVID. In just a few minutes, you're going to hear from my friend Sarah Freyr, a COVID survivor and first grade teacher in Washington, D.C. And of course, the number one thing that we can do as educators to take care of our students is take care of ourselves. And so after Sarah shares her story about hope and inspiration, you're going to get to hear from Dorina Sackman-Ebuwa on how we can develop our own emotional intelligence so that we can be resilient in the year ahead. Regardless of what our virtual or in-person classrooms look like this year, that first bell is about to ring. And our classrooms and our computer screens and our hearts are about to be filled with the unmistakable sound of kids arriving at school. So whether we're teaching online, in person, or in between, let's engage, let's explain, and let's empower our students. As teachers, it's what we do. Thank you so very much. It is now my honor to introduce our next speaker. On March 13th, that famous day, after her school announced that it was closing due to coronavirus, Sarah Freyr left her first grade classroom at Friendship Woodridge Academy in Washington, D.C. That evening, she found out that she had contracted COVID-19. Today, she's going to share her story about surviving COVID while trying to teach and care for her first grade low-income students who were terrified. It is a story that is remarkable and filled with passion, hope, and inspiration for anyone who works with kids. Please welcome Sanford Teacher Award winner, Sarah Freyr.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for that. Wow. I love your energy. I'm loving the 3 E's. Those are really important. Thank you, Missouri. I'm so excited to be here today. I know for so many of you guys that it may seem like a long time since we've seen our students face to face. For me, it has been especially a very long time. Like so many of us, on that afternoon of March 13th, we got the news that our schools were closing for a little while. Really not sure of how long this was going to continue with the pandemic. I told my students, I will see you soon. No worries, it's going to be okay. They were scared. They had so many questions. What is this, Miss Freyr? Why can't we see each other? I said, don't worry, we're going to see each other on the computer. It's going to be fine. I let them know, some of you guys, I will see your parents on that following Monday. So the following Monday came, and I had to go back to the school to give out supplies to have the students get ready for virtual learning. That Monday after work, I went to the store, bought water, Clorox wipes, everything. Everybody was in the store getting everything because we didn't know how long we were going to be in the house. Well, that night, the middle of the night, I woke up in pain. It felt like a bricks of rocks had came and just hit my body. I literally could not move. I was just laying there trying to get up. I said, what is this? I felt myself because I was getting really, really hot. I closed my eyes and I said a prayer. And at that moment, I knew I had contracted the coronavirus. What scared me the most was that I was here alone by myself. No one to help me where I couldn't move. I thought to myself, A, where did it come from? B, how am I going to get online to help my students? Because they come from so many backgrounds where they have little to nothing, some of them. And they were scared when I left them. And I know as a teacher, we are like their second parents. So I knew I had to be there. But at that moment, I couldn't. I called a colleague and asked her, could I get some help? Because I have to get to the hospital. I made it to the hospital. They tested me for the flu. They test me for pregnancy. I wasn't pregnant. They test me for then the coronavirus. The nurse and the doctor said, Miss Freyr, you have to wait 2 weeks and stay quarantined, but I'm pretty sure you have the coronavirus because your temperature will not break. They was like, we want you to stay for a little while to see if your temperature would break. Immediately, you guys, I called my principal. My principal was amazing. She said, Miss Freyr, I'm going to FaceTime you. She FaceTimed me that night right there in the midst of me in the hospital to give me encouraging words to know that the school has my back and we would get through this together, no matter what the outcome was. It meant the world to me for my school leader to say that. Days went on. I came home. I got online. It was the hardest class I ever taught. Hard. Reason being so, I was still sick. I would cough, cough, cough. As the students would come on, I got myself together. I said, Sarah, breathe. It's going to be okay. As I saw their faces, I tried so hard not to cry. Because I felt a little insecure because I would just look so sick to myself. Well, we started class. They were excited to see all their friends, to see their teacher, but thought it was kind of cool. We were all on these little boxes. And I'm sitting there trying to breathe. Well, as I had a coughing really, really bad, I would move away from the camera so they really couldn't see me, and I would mute myself. One time, forgot to mute myself, forgot to move away from the camera. A parent texted me in that moment and said, Miss Freyr, do you have the coronavirus? I didn't know how to respond. He said, well, we got a message from the school that said a teacher had contracted the coronavirus. They couldn't tell us who, of course, but with you coughing like that, moving away from the camera and this information, I'm just going to put 2 and 2 together. You must have the coronavirus. I didn't know how to respond in that moment. I didn't know if the teachers, the parents, and the students were going to judge me. Did they not want to see me anymore? Look at me in a different way because of this uncertain new thing, this virus that is killing people? I just didn't know how it was going to be perceived. So I took a moment and breathed again. I responded and I said, yes, it's me. I'm the one at the school that has the coronavirus. Right away, the text turned to a phone call. He said, Miss Freyr, we are all here for you. Please let us know if you need anything. We got your back. Those words, on top of my principal words, was really encouraging. But really what helped me through this time were my students. When I got on Zoom with them the following day after talking to the parent, I let them know what was going on with me. They were so sad, but so supportive. They're like, Miss Freyr, are you okay? Can you teach? What do you need us to do? We can come to you. It was the sweetest little thing. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. But really what inspired me was that they persevered to the end. And I'm really big on telling them that, to persevere. They persevered so much. One student had problems with the internet. So he asked his big brother to take him to the local Starbucks just to get online to learn and also to check on his teacher. When I say that just melt my heart, it melt my heart. So days went on. I was quarantined 14 days, still trying to teach, still trying to recover. Still not really all the way there. Then what happened after that, I lost so much weight because I couldn't hold any food down. I got down to 95 pounds. I felt so insecure. I would put on big sweaters to try to cover up, put on makeup so I wouldn't look so sick. When I had to get on the call with my colleagues, I would put my screen on black so it could just say my name, because I didn't want anyone to see me, because I was so insecure about how little I look, because I wasn't used to being that small. It's been a long time since I've been 95 pounds. So I just felt unhealthy. So then my anxiety kicked in. I didn't know what this was. I've never been someone that had anxiety. I've always been the go out there, go getter, daredevil, do whatever, try anything. Now, this anxiety that I feel of just getting on a Zoom call, the anxiety I felt of I might have to leave the house, it was crazy. But what really hit me is in June when I had to return back to the school, the place I love. I love to teach. I love my school. I got there in June to come back up to class. As I was in the parking lot, I had the worst panic attack ever. I literally started crying, shaking. I didn't know what was wrong with me. A friend of mine helped me through it and was like, just breathe, Sarah, breathe, breathe. I knew that this was not over. Yes, I got retested and I didn't have coronavirus anymore, but this anxiety, this insecurity, me not being able to go into the building that I love, it was the worst feeling ever. So I went in, finally calmed myself down. The security guard helped me get some few things, and I hurried up and got out. Called the doctor. They let me know that this is not uncommon of what I'm going through. A lot of people have this anxiety issue after they go through a crisis like this. So during this time, I had to learn that it's okay not to be okay, Sarah. It's okay to take your time. You don't always have to be there. You have to get yourself together in order to be the best you that you can be for your students and colleagues. So many times as educators, we just go, 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 and we give ourselves so much and we take so much on from the students that we serve. And I just could not find that balance, and the anxiety was kicking in. So here we are now at the beginning of the school year. And whether you're online or in the school building, I want to encourage you to take time for yourself. Take time and be patient with this process of this new uncertainty that was going on. And most importantly, just lean on each other, because this, how I healed, was really out of love. The love of my principal and the love of my students. Their love is what healed me. I hope you have a great school year. I hope you stay encouraged, and remember, we all can get through this. I'm going to now pass it on to Dorina Sackman, who will help us through this process. Thank you again.
Woo! Sorry, just had to put myself together on that one, Sarah. You know how I feel about you, and my voice is shaking so much. So just talk amongst yourselves, please, because I'm having a moment right now. Because I have a severe anxiety towards COVID, and then to listen to someone who worked through it and know that the perseverance of her and continuing to teach through it, to me, is just nothing but just amazing, incredible, and you are truly my hero, and I look up to you so much. So thank you for that, and we should lift each other up in all ways possible. So Alex, thank you for your story about Luis. That makes me realize that we need to check up on all our kids. And Sarah, just so beautiful. So Mr. Douglas, thank you for this moment as well. Bailey, thank you. If I could share my screen so that we could get started and have a little party here talking about emotional intelligence so that we can actually think constructively and behave wisely during this time. And this is exactly what I'd love to do. So just want to give me a thumbs up if everybody can see my screen. So let's see if we can do this. I will put this up and then I will share here. Thumbs up if everybody sees the screen. Excellent. Let's get this party started. I got my messy bun, so let's have some fun. And I got my double chin. So let's dive right in, shall we? Emotional intelligence. What is it? And this is what we're going to talk about. First, before anything else, where is your place of refuge, where you have your respite or something you love to do? I promise you, post-COVID, my home is your home. I now live, I'm a New York girl in a country world at the Florida-Georgia line in the tippy top of North Central Florida, where I live on a ranch. It's not a farm, it's not a ranch, it's a ranch, because I have no idea what the difference is. I'm a New York girl. But the point is that this eventually will become a center of emotional intelligence, where I implore you to come and visit me so that we may break bread together and break eggs together from our chickens and enjoy each other as we talk about the ability to think constructively and behave wisely. Please come visit. And the next thing I want to ask you is something that is very, very important. So often in our American society, we have this salutation that's quite face value. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how are you? You good? Hey, nice to see you. Everybody good? What's up? Hey, y'all. However it is you do your salutation, many times we answer face value. Good, great, excellent, fabulous, thank you. Now is the time more than ever. I want you to ask yourself, when is the last time somebody actually asked, are you okay? And when is the last time you genuinely picked up the phone or saw someone or Zoomed someone and said, are you okay? Now, whether you love or loathe this woman, way back last year or a year and a half ago, Meghan Markle was doing an interview with ITV News, and the reporter, the interviewer, looked at Meghan and saw she wasn't okay, stopped, and then you could hear him muffled and turn around and say, are you okay? And believe it or not, shocked, Meghan turns around and says, you know, not many people have asked if I'm okay. One of the most important things that we need to do is to be true in our salutations now of, are you okay? And that is my question for you right now. Part of an embedded SEL for my students, and when we go into virtual learning, when I coach teachers, is to talk about emotions. And I love, this is very old school, but it really works, in which we go to wordart.com and the kids type in a word that they feel that they're feeling at that time as a way to start the day. And it becomes this word cloud. And at the end of the week, we see the word clouds and we begin to see either a sign that some of the kids, okay, they're still, we have to make sure we want to check what their emotion is, or we see an increase in positivity. And this is a wonderful way to embed student in SEL for students to truly feel comfortable about expressing their emotions. So right now, what I'd like you to do is think about one word in your head, just one word about how you are feeling about the new school year. Positive, negative, neutral, have that word in your head right now, okay? And now when you keep that, we're going to do a little bit of talking about emotional intelligence. Now, very many people have heard this word. You go to Starbucks or Barnes and Noble, and you'll turn around and see these books, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. And a lot of that is great, but it is really about emotional intelligence is in fact transformative emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's work in 1995 is based on some work in the 60s of Salovey and Mayer. And not to bore you with the research, but I'm in 29th grade getting my doctorate in emotional intelligence and teachers. So it was important for me to share this information that a lot of Daniel Goleman's work of emotional intelligence is in fact work for corporate world. But transformative emotional intelligence was created by philosophers and professors at Texas A&M Corpus Christi who saw the need for emotional intelligence in teachers and students. Hence the reason I'd like to talk about transformative emotional intelligence. And here are the 4 major definitions of what TEI is by Nelson and Lowe. And I'm going to read the slide only because I want to stress some of the words. And as an ELL teacher for 23 years, this is kind of what happens. Emotionally intelligent behavior is reflected how? The ability to, which means you are cognizant of it. You have a choice, the ability to think constructively and behave wisely. It is the ability, I mean, you are cognizant of it. And with that, intentional and self-directed behavior needs reflective thought. And you know what the number 2 bullet point means? It just means calling yourself out for your emotions. When you're really emotionally and your emotions are heightened, you stop for a second and call yourself out and think constructively and behave wisely so that your emotions do not take over you. You own your emotion. You have to have that intentional self-directed behavior. The other part leads to wise and effective behavior once you call yourself out is the ability to, again, regulate and express your emotions healthily. Now, people might turn around and say, I can't do that. I'm Italian. I'm hot-blooded. Me too. I'm Latinx. No, I'm Irish. Perpetuated stereotypes about emotions are terrible. What we want to do as the individual and realize that it is about your brain. And that is leading to the fourth one. It's the harmony of the cognitive and emotional mind. Understanding that you have two brains, not the left side and the right side. I'm a lefty, so I'm in the right side of my brain. Not that. I'm talking about the neocortex here and the limbic system, in which limbic system is responsible for feelings and trust, and the neocortex has the analytical thought where the information comes out. When your amygdala does not have that old school fight or flight, that amygdala, when it has fear, is unable to process information. Children can't learn, teachers can't teach. But when you have a balance of that emotion, of the cognitive and emotional mind, and are cognizant of the fact that there are two brains trying to work together, that is how you increase your emotional intelligence. Shall we? So this is basically the breakdown of that. There's something called Believe Cafe on YouTube that I created because like wacky math hour that Alex did because he saw a need for teachers and students and parents to understand mathematics. I saw there was a need for teachers who were freaking out about what was happening, rightfully so. I said, how can I help? How can I help? I started Believe Cafe on Twitter, and now it's on Facebook, Instagram, and it's on YouTube, so that you can just download 40 sessions on how to learn about emotional intelligence. And here's a sample just very quickly to let you know what we're talking about the ability. Let's just say, remember the word that you had in that word wall. In the word art, how are you feeling? Now you can see there are sentence frames there, and you say, I'm feeling anxious. Now you could put, I'm feeling anxious because that's the intentional self-directed behavior. And now using Carol Dweck's work of growth mindset, you want to say, however, so the minute you have a negative thought, you want to own it. The minute you have a heightened emotion, you want to own it. And then you want to say, however, so that you can actually take that emotion and be proactive about it. Because too much in our society, we are reactive, not proactive about our emotions. Now, if you're happy right now, you could say, I'm feeling awesome because, and you want to be able to also have that intrapersonal conversation with yourself to say, I'm feeling awesome because you want to own it. And the minute you start telling yourself why you feel this way in a positive manner, you actually reflect the positivity. And that's where the transformative emotional intelligence transforms to others. You reflect positivity and people want to see that. Moving further, you have to realize the ability to regulate and express your emotions. And as John Maxwell has said beautifully, change is inevitable, growth is optional. So we know inevitably we have to change. And as teachers coming right there to the moment, we know growth is there. But it is up to you to grow emotional intelligence as well. So another exercise for you to understand and regulate your intentional self-directed behavior is to say, okay, I have reflected and accepted doo-doo in my life, and now I'm choosing to grow with diddy each day. This is an exercise that you could put in a journal for you to remember every time what you have reflected and accepted on and what you are choosing to grow. When you do this every morning, you could do this with students, your PLC, anybody, your family, or yourself privately, you will then bring positive personal thought and behavior to you. And again, it becomes reflective thought. Now, I just want to say to embed some culturally responsiveness. If anybody here has ornithophobia, if anybody here is afraid of birds that are flying, just look away. But for those of who are not, here is a graphic to show you exactly what the harmony of the cognitive and the emotional mind is. Now, anybody watching and everybody here on the Zoom, I'd love for you to make a bird as if you're doing it like a shadow puppet. And if you make this bird just like this, which is a beautiful way of a symbol or a metaphor of your cognitive and your emotional mind. Like a bird who wants to fly, you cannot fly. A bird cannot fly unless both wings are healthy and flying flying balanced. But if one wing is injured or one wing is stronger than the other, the bird's gonna go, whoa! The bird needs to perch, stop, and go, how do I get my wings to fly with balance? Your emotional mind and your cognitive mind. If your emotions are too heightened, you have to perch and say, wait a second, let's get the cognitive, let's have analytical thought, let's figure out, why am I so upset about this person not wearing a mask in the middle of Target? I have to step back for a second. I don't have control over that. Chill. This is the moment in which you realize, in order for your emotions, they have to fly, they have to be balanced. Interestingly enough, I don't know if you could tell, I'm a little bit passionate about what I do as an educator, but my emotional wing is actually heightened. So I always have to check with my cognitive. I perch often. Now, my husband, who actually is a software developer and very linear, he actually is cognitive dominant, where he has to perch and check to add emotion to the equation. So everybody is different. So it's not just about heightened emotion. It also could be more cognitive and less emotion. And that is why you want to sit and remember this analogy. Moving further about that is that in order for this to be balanced, you need to understand what you have control over and what you don't. And in Believe Cafe, I do something called cleaning out your junk drawer. And cleaning out your junk drawer is basically, well, think about your junk drawer. I mean, we were in quarantine for so long. I bet you almost every American household has some sort of junk drawer. I know I have one. I have koozies from 1997. I have tape that doesn't work that you can't stick off. I have stamps from like 1979. I have things going, and that's weird. I'm only 29. I wasn't even born then, but I digress. But what you have in your junk drawer is that you're sitting there with all this stuff, but then there's essential things that you do need in your junk drawer, like a tape measure if you're fixing up your house, or a pen, or a stapler. So what you want to do is, like the metaphor of a junk drawer, take Post-it notes on a piece of paper, draw a pretend drawer. Every single thing you are concerned about, every single thing that's on your mind, each on a Post-it note, put on into your junk drawer that you created on a piece of paper. Do this with your PLCs, your students, everybody, and then look at it and say, okay, what do I have control over and what do I not? Anything you do not have control over, get out of the junk drawer to make the essential junk drawer of the things you do have control over. This is so key because you can hashtag meet the moment when you have control over certain things and when you don't. And this is an important feature by thecounselingteacher.com to let you know what you have to do in order for you to have control. This is part of emotional intelligence. This also increases your stress management by decreasing your stress levels. This is a perfect example of getting into the zone. Get into the zone. This is exactly like what you would do to choose how you are going back to school when it comes to COVID. On the left-hand side, I did this graphic from mindfulnessireland.com. I saw this and I said, okay, my fear zone is this, my learning zone, and my growth zone. Where are you in your fear, learning, and growth? Collectively, as a school, it is a beautiful thing for each teacher to do this, to see where they are engaged so that we can help teachers, because everybody is handling this differently. And we want to differentiate our emotional intelligence help as much as we differentiate our lessons for our students. So definitely, it is a wonderful way for you to see what is fear, what is learning, and then what is growth. And I'm rushing a 2-day, 3-day seminar actually in about 20 minutes. So I know it's a lot to take in and I'm rushing and I sound like I'm the Tasmanian devil on a double espresso, but really it's important for you to get as much information about this and to get you excited about emotional intelligence. So to let you know very quickly how this works for teaching right now in the time of Corona and using your emotional intelligence 101, there are 4 major pillars to transformative emotional intelligence. We're going to go backwards. Intrapersonal, self-management, personal leadership, and interpersonal and healthy relationships. Within the 4 pillars are 13 emotional intelligence skills. You can take something called a scale assessment that assesses. Now, again, this isn't an IQ. You don't have a quotient. You don't have a full set where you take the test and go, this is how I am emotionally intelligent. No, it is a process for you to see and grow, a lifelong thing to grow your emotional intelligence. So don't think you take one test and that's it. You could take tests over and over so that you grow each aspect and skill of emotional emotional intelligence, but they just fall into 4 different pillars. I just want to focus on the bottom, intrapersonal. The reason I start with the bottom, starting from the bottom, now we're here. Sorry, had to do that. But intrapersonal is self-esteem is the key to emotional intelligence. Self-esteem. That's a tough one for me because I didn't realize I didn't have as much self-esteem. I can play a good game, but man, oh man, that person talking to me in my brain, it is very difficult because they can beat me up. You must have a beautiful intrapersonal conversation with that voice in your head who loves you, who gives you grace, who gives you patience. It is that one key thing that will reduce your stress, increasing stress management, increase your drive strength, your commitment ethic, and your self-management, increase empathy. But the biggest part of your own self-esteem is that you're not as anxious and you have less anger, because anger is just actually what? It's just really a matter of accountability it's information that's been repressed and emotions, and it's a lot to do with accountability, according to Brene Brown. So you also want to focus on something very big is assertion. Teachers need to know exactly how they feel about things going into this year. How do you feel about education? How do you feel about COVID-19? How do you feel about Black Lives Matter and anti-racist classrooms? How do you feel? Assertion is key because we know we've been that teacher during brick and mortar. When you knock on the door and you turn around and go, excuse me, one second. There's no more paper in the Xerox. I'm sorry to bother. If you're that I'm sorry person, we can't do that in our profession. As teacher leaders, we need to have assertion, which more assertive you are, the better with the decision-making and less stress, all proven research. And it's really important for you to realize, know where you stand in things. It is very powerful and it increases your relationship and leadership skills. And all of these things are connected together, every single one of these. It's like gauges within your own brain and your own well-being of how you manage every single day. So are you going to meet the moment of emotional intelligence? Well, as you do some virtual learning, I just want you to take a very quick look at the things on the left and the things on the right. On the left are all the 13 emotional intelligence skills with the 4 pillars. And on the right are actually what happens according to evidence-based and research-based, what emotional intelligence can do in a classroom virtually. Take a look at that while I toast to everybody here. I promise you it's water. Quickly, just want to make sure I'm honoring everybody's time. We're going to go to the next one. Here's time management, a wonderful exercise on a wheel to understand where you've been for every single 24 hours. I did not realize how much time I spent on TikTok going dun, 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 dun. Meanwhile, Sarah's sitting there teaching her students with COVID. So come on. So this is why we want to think about time management and teaching. Here are the other major things that happens with virtual learning and emotional intelligence. And number 10 is key. Now, looking at all of these, again, positive stress management, I want you to realize that we have a biological predisposition for us to actually have stress in our brains. It already exists in our brain. To go left, to go right, our brain is stressed, going, which one do you want? Which one do you want? We don't feel that because it's just part of our brain makeup in neuroscience. However, the increased stress of culture and our own livelihood and who we are is what causes the major stress. But we have stress management and the ability to manage that stress factor that's already existing in our brain. This is another exercise for you to realize stress is a natural part of the human brain. Really key and great to teach our kids, especially our other colleagues and parents as well. So why is this all important? Because we teach too much content intellect. This is the year of emotional intellect for ourselves, our families, our communities, our stakeholders, and goodness gracious, our students. We need this because, again, here's a biological predisposition, everything in gray that you see there. We are hardwired. You are born a baby with that. Noam Chomsky talks about the black box of grammar, and researchers here and neuroscientists talk about, like Hernandez, talk about the hardwiring of these emotions. The ones on the side, they are not. That has to be taught. So imagine you have kids, and I said it with such a strong New York accent, taught, Midwestern, taught. I'm gonna try. But what you have here is that these ones on the side are so key that we have to embed it. But guess what? On the bottom, you see that one bullet point. Without our own knowledge of emotional intelligence, can we embed SEL? Because if we're so stressed, we want to keep in check these emotions and be aware of the ones on the sides so that we can see how we can embed them into our virtual lessons. That will increase our students' SEL and emotional intelligence as well. So know that emotional intelligence and the expressions are very different. And like I said, differentiated teaching, differentiated emotional intelligence emotions. Why is this important? Very quickly, in 2015, the American Federation of Teachers did a research and saw 34% of teachers actually needed mental health help. In 2017, 58% it rose up. Imagine what it is now. So this is why we want to talk about the essential part of who you are, something called compassion fatigue. This is what Sarah went through, the vicarious trauma. This is what Alex went through with Luis. When he knew that Luis did not have anywhere to go home, he went home and he lived as if he was living Luis and got sad about it. But he had to use the emotional intelligence and the balance of the cognitive and emotional to jump back up so it didn't impact his work, his life, himself, his family. Sarah had compassion fatigue because the first thing she did, she had COVID. She calls her principal. She checks on her students. These are the people who teach children. But that can lead to compassion fatigue. And that anxiety attack that happened in the parking lot was as a result of compassion fatigue and PTSD because of her anxiety. We must check these things and realize it is okay not to be okay. But after 2 weeks of a consistent feeling of any of these, please go get help. I know this personally. I suffer from a mental illness called panic disorder, and I have to make sure that they are in check all the time. And I'm not afraid to say that M word. We have to keep it out there so that we are safe and know it is okay to not be okay. I promise you, learn about compassion fatigue and emotional intelligence, and you will balance your cognitive and emotional mind. With this, it's a lot to take in, right? I know it's a lot of information. So I just want you to know and leave with just a few things. This is what the emotionally intelligent teacher knows. We have to realize all the different factors that influence high levels of achievement, and that is low stress, high self-esteem, assertion, decision-making, leadership, compassion, empathy, and truly that drive. We have it, but we don't want to burn ourselves out. The commitment ethic and the drive will lead to all of that. We need to learn about emotional intelligence this year so we can have it to teach our children. Now I want you to think about that emotion that you had in the beginning, and now what is your emotion now? I hope it is a good, positive word that you feel uplifted from the 3 speakers that you've had right now, that Mr. Doug has given us this opportunity to talk to you. And I just want you to know my word that I chose, well, believe. Be the educators who lead to inspire and empower via empathy. You don't believe me? Just watch. May you have an amazing, amazing year filled with emotional intelligence and the balance of the cognitive and the emotional mind. And may you always believe. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you so much, Dorina. I can certainly see why they call you a Tasmanian devil on a double espresso. Wow, I have to tell you, I am feeling awesome, and it is because of your presentation. So we've got a few minutes. I've got a question if other people don't, but before I turn it back to Dr. Taman, I just wanted to give a shout out. So many people watching. I'm following on the Facebook Live, but just want to give a shout out to Christy Reed, who says she's here representing citizens of the World Charter School. Thank you all so much for this presentation. Looks like Jennifer Christensen's also there from Citizens, and Amber Parks as well. And Ugur Demirkan is here from Frontier Schools, and Robin Wabi from says charter school educators are the best. And Tanya Shippey says that she's here from Hogan Prep. Jennifer, thank you. MCPSA Frontier appreciates all of your support. And Babette says, I love your energy in the presentation. Thank you. And Margaret, thanks you so much as well. It has been an absolute honor. I have a question that I'm dying to hear before I turn it back over to you, Doug. And Sarah, I would just love to hear, as you hear Dorina's presentation and as you think about everything that you've been through with just this unbelievably, heartfelt and remarkable story. What lessons might you be able to take as somebody who's, been through it all? What's on your mind? What are you thinking at this point?
Thank you. I would definitely say I did have to learn balance. And I'm still trying to get the balance. My mom, she's always really been into yoga. So I tapped into yoga now to help me with that. I started a nonprofit, something that I really love and inspire. That it is just the core of my heart. It's called Reflective Pages. And so I donate books of multicultural literature to children in schools. And so those things, and just being open, like Dorina was saying, it's okay that I'm not okay. It's okay that now I have these anxiety issues, and just every day being reflective and thankful of the little things, and saying things like, like she was saying, I'm not okay, but I also have XYZ going on. So just finding that balance has really, really helped me.
Excellent. Well, I hope you can make it out to San Diego. We have more yoga studios per capita than any other place in the country. So with that in mind, Doug, love to turn it back over to you. Any final thoughts, reactions, things like that? It has been an absolute pleasure to be with all of you. And over to your fearless leader. Over to you, Doug.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex. Really appreciate it. And Alex, Sarah, Dorina, great job. Really appreciate the information, and so appreciative that you joined us today and were here for us. I'm just going to close it where we began, which is you folks, you are all our education first responders. Remember to have grace with one another, and we are here to support you. We wish you the very best in the start of this school year, and we know that you're going to meet the moment. Thank you very much, and have a terrific start to your year.